You are listening to the Grandest Tour by the Cycling Podcast. Brought to you by iwoca. Flexible loans built for small businesses. iwoca.co.uk.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Lizzy Banks.
Hello, good evening, Richard. Nice to be back for the final day of the 4 days of Lizzy Banks with a very exciting time trial to finish it off.
Yes, a good one to finish with. And Lionel Birnie.
Hello, Richard. Hello, Lizzy.
Hello, Lionel. Time trial or school sports? I mean, this business of the bike change is very divisive, isn't it? And it added a lot of intrigue today and interest and drama, I suppose. But, well, we'll get on to that, won't we? An interesting day at the Vuelta. Have you got the headlines for us, please, Lionel?
I have, Richard, yes. Stage 13 to Mirador de Ezaro, 33.7 kilometres, 90% of it were flat rolling flat, and lovely coastal roads that they were on. And then the sting in the tail really was a sting in the tail, and as you said, Richard, the riders were swapping bikes from their time trial bikes to their climbing bikes just at the bottom of the hill. And you was continuing this sort of school sports theme. There wasn't an egg and spoon section halfway through or anything like that.
Or a sack race element. You have to get in a sack and hop up to the bike.
Yeah, three-legged cycling. How would that work? But they are playing a game of pass the parcel with the red jersey, aren't they? Because Primoz Roglic is back in red.
Pass the parcel isn't really a school sports activity, Lionel. It's more a children's birthday party.
All right.
You're getting confused.
It's all to do with children. It's some things children do. Things that children do. Pass the parcel, musical chairs. What's the other one? Grandmother's footsteps, statues. Anyway, Primoz Roglic won his fourth stage of the race by just a single second from CCC's American rider Will Barta,
who we'll hear from later on.
We will indeed, yes. The early leader in the time trial was Remy Cavagna of De Koning Quickstep, and then he was knocked out of the hot seat by Nelson Oliveira of Movistar, and then by Will Barta. And Barta's time looked like it might stand the test until Roglic pipped him on the finish line. A single second was all that separated them. Oliveira was 10th, but the GC battle between Roglic, Hugh Carthy and Richard Carapaz was the thing that we all had our eyes on in the last half an hour or so of the stage. Hugh Carthy put in a fantastic ride to finish fourth on the stage, 25 seconds behind Roglic. Carapaz was another 24 seconds behind Carthy in seventh place. So the overall now is Roglic back in red with a reasonable looking advantage over Carapaz. It's now 39 seconds. The gap. Hugh Carthy is at 47 seconds, looking good for a place on the podium or possibly more. We'll discuss that in the podcast today. And Dan Martin is in fourth, but now at 1:42. So those three have it all to fight for over the final week.
You are listening to the Grandest Tour by the Cycling Podcast. Brought to you by iwoca. Flexible loans built for small businesses. Join 50,000 customers taking on life's twists and turns and scaling new heights with iwoca. If you run a business, find out more at iwoca.co.uk. iwoca.co.uk.
We are sponsored by iwoca, and since iwoca was founded 7 years ago, they have grown from a small startup to become one of the fastest growing business lenders in Europe. And now they have a team of more than 300 people, and they're working towards the goal of funding more than 1 million small businesses. They try to make the business of borrowing money for your company easier, quicker and simpler. So if you run a small business, you might want to check out iwoca.co.uk. Now, over the past few episodes, we've been hearing from some of iwoca's staff members about a charity bike ride that they went on from London to Brighton to raise money for the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust. Let's hear again from James Turner, who this evening is going to talk about how his interest in cycling predates his time working at iwoca as a key member of the IT team.
I'd always been interested in cycling from the age I was old enough to get a paper round. When I left university, I actually had a brief tenure working in the cycle industry in a shop in Woking. Been very much interested in cycling for a number of years now. I currently work from my bike shed in the garden, and people on the Zoom calls are always commenting that there's probably sort of 8 or 10 bicycles hanging from the wall behind me on the calls. Definitely a bit of an addict on that front. I have been very much sort of a proponent of helping other Iwokans get involved in cycling. I sort of provide an ad hoc cycle clinic for them where they can bring their bikes into the office now, and I'll go over them, check the roadworthiness, and give them advice on anything they need. So it's about like what we do for most things in Iwoca. What can you give to others to help along the way?
Well, certainly a crucial day for the Vuelta today, and in deciding, what might happen this week. And Roglic certainly in the driving seat. We'll hear from his teammate at Jumbo-Visma, George Bennett, in the final part of tonight's podcast. But before we get on to Roglic and the implications for the overall, a real heartbreaker for Will Barta, a Barta breaker. He's still only 24, Will Barta, but he seems to have been around for a few years, because I first met him when I went to Nice a few years ago to meet up with Ian Boswell, Joe Dombrowski and Larry Warbass. He's another graduate of the Action Hagens Bermans team, and he is without a team next year at the moment. He's had 2 years with CCC, and it may well change now on the back of this performance, because he was in the hot seat, and it looked like he might hold on and take a pretty incredible stage win, and a rare win for his team, CCC, who have not had a great couple of seasons. Close but no cigar for Will Barta, beaten by a second by Primoz Roglic. I managed to catch up with him as he was warming down after the time trial. Tell me what you were thinking sitting there in the hot seat. I mean, Roglic must have been the guy you were worried about.
First of all, I thought top 5 or top 10 was possible, but your expectations change when you see on the splits that you're up. So yeah, I really thought I had it actually when I saw him at 7 seconds coming to the line, and I think I have it, and then just barely didn't have it. So yeah, it was quite a disappointment in the end, but I mean, if you asked me yesterday, I would have been quite happy.
Did you feel like you were on a great day today?
Yeah, I felt like it was a good day, but to be honest, I didn't think it was quite that good. I've never been quite at that level, so I wouldn't have guessed it was that good of a day. But for me, it was really a good day. You're
a very strong time trialist. Do you do a lot of work on your time trialing?
Yeah, I do a fair amount. I wouldn't say I'm super crazy with it, but yeah, I definitely go at least once a week on my TT bike and do some efforts.
I don't want to encourage you to do this, but have you gone back and looked at where you might have, lost or gained a second here or there, including of course a bike change?
Yeah, I haven't looked too much. I just saw someone showed me a picture with the bike change times, but I think, to be honest, it was the team did a super good job with it. We practiced it yesterday, and for sure, when you lose by that little, you look back at it, but I really don't see where I could have taken much time. Also, it's easy to look back now and say, if I did a few more hard pedal strokes, but at the time, you're really on the limit, so yeah. Did
Roglic say anything to you at the finish?
I didn't cross paths with him by the time he was there. I was already out of the hot seat and out of the little tent. So
he might come and find you tomorrow in the bunch, maybe.
Yeah, I think we'll have to talk about it. For sure he's super strong and deserved it as well. So.
And what about you, Will? Your team obviously is going to be no more at the end of the year. Do you have anything lined up for next year or anything possible?
Not yet. I've been talking with some teams, but nothing's been signed. So hoping this gets it over the line.
Has your phone been ringing red hot since the time trial?
Yeah, it's been a lot of messages. So still have to get back to everybody.
Agents and team, or your agent and teams perhaps as well?
So far, my agent sent me a message congratulating me, but yeah, I think it's he might have it. Hopefully he has a busy night, but so we'll hear soon. I think it should be a good thing, I think.
So that was Will Barta. I was quite impressed by how sort of pragmatic he was about it, that he preferred to dwell on a great performance rather than the disappointment of not quite winning. And yeah, hopefully he will get a contract for next year. He's too good to not have a place in a World Tour team, I think.
I was really, really gutted for him. And being able to look at it with that kind of perspective, so close to taking that loss as well. You know, he was still on the rollers when you were speaking to him. He was still warming down. And to be able to put it into perspective, when the emotions are so raw it's quite something. And the other thing is, the reason I'm so gutted is because for Roglic to win another stage, he's already an incredible rider. He's already got so many wins. But for Will Barta, if he'd have won that stage, it would have been such an incredible breakthrough ride for him. And obviously we all saw the great ride that he did, but there's a big difference between winning a stage and coming second. And everybody always remembers the win and people don't remember who came second. And especially, being without a contract at this point, and now we're into November now. So it's getting really, really late. Usually the deadline for all of the contracts to be in with the UCI is the 31st of October. And obviously there's going to be some special circumstances this year. But yeah, it's not a nice position to be racing for your contract in November.
I mean, those who know Will Barta well speak very, very highly of him indeed. He's very, very nice guy, very serious, very dedicated, based himself in Nice for a number of years now. And yeah, hopefully that ride will get him a place on a team. I mean, the fascinating thing in today's time trial was this business of the bike change, really. Pretty much everybody did change bikes. Henrik Mas, we saw a video earlier of him practicing the bike change, and he was pretty slow. And when it came to the race itself, he didn't change bikes in the designated area. He took one from the roof of the car, as everybody did at the Tour de France at the La Planche des Belles Filles stage. And I watched it with great interest with Roglic in particular, who started relatively slowly. Hugh Carthy was up on him at the first check, but really got better as the stage went on. And, I just wondered watching it whether La Planche des Belles Filles would happen again, in the sense that, I was going to ask you, Lizzy, just about swapping like that from one bike to another with quite different positions, using different muscle groups. It seemed to be something Roglic struggled with at the Tour. Here he coped with it much better, but how difficult is that?
It's not something I've ever had to do, thankfully, and I never want to have to do it. I mean, in my opinion, it's really a gimmick that has been brought in by organisers that I don't really think there's a place for it in time trialling, to be honest. I mean, in time trialling, I want to see a pure time trial where you go out for a certain distance and you try and go as fast as you can over that distance. And I don't feel like how fast you can jump off a bike and jump onto another bike should be a factor. That's not to say that I don't think that time trials should have elevation in them, and sometimes tricky elevation that involves careful selection of gears and maybe even, a setup where you've got a road bike with extensions on and a disc wheel and a deep front. I think we're seeing a little bit too much of this, bike changing in a time trial business.
It all looks a bit triathlon-y to me.
I just think it's a bit of a gimmick that we don't really need. And the other thing is, you're going full gas in a time trial and it's so much stress on your glutes, and jumping off a bike and then jumping onto a different bike is a really difficult thing, and it can really upset your rhythm. We can have things that upset and set rhythms in time trials and create interest, like climbs and descents and twists and turns, but I'm not really a big fan of the bike change mid-race, to be honest.
I agree with you 100%. What about you, Lionel?
Well, I completely disagree, obviously.
Excellent.
Because, it served up some drama today, and La Planche des Belles Filles at the Tour as well. What's the alternative? Just the test at La Planche des Belles Filles was the transition between riding a fairly standard time trial type course and then switching to a serious climb, and the same today, really. This was a very short, steep effort. Well, not even that short, actually, but a very steep effort. And, the riders make the choice to start on the time trial bike because it's faster for the flatter section. And then they make the choice to switch to the climbing bike because it's faster for the climbing section. You could just say that that's the course. You pick one type of bike and you ride it from start to finish. There you go. The riders are given the choice to change, and they all choose to change. So I don't really see...
As long as you're allowed a bike change, you can change bike to different type of bike if it's a legal bike. So you couldn't enforce a type of bike for a stage. But I don't really like it. I mean, I don't really like time trial bikes. I think do away with them altogether.
I see what you're saying, Lionel, but what I'm saying really is that, you know, the organisers are putting in these specific steep climbs at the end of the races in order that the riders kind of are forced to change their bike, and that part of the spectacle of the race is how fast a rider can change their bike, and are they going to have trouble, and are they going to be able to clip in. And I'm all for putting steep climbs into a time trial, but not always at the end. You know, put them in the middle, and then the riders have to tackle them on a TT bike, and then you've really got an interesting kind of equipment choice, because it's not going from one thing to another, and it still upsets the rhythm if you've got a massive climb in the middle. And personally, I'm not that keen on the gimmick.
Or they change bikes twice in that case, maybe.
Yeah, or they.
Well, there you are. So you either say don't have an interesting course, or you say you've got to stick with one type of...
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I mean, I think you can definitely have an interesting course, but what we've seen in Bergen at the Tour de France and here is that you've had this really steep climb right at the end, which has forced the rider to change bike. If you have a course which is dynamic the whole way through, and you have a hard climb in it, but it's in the middle of the course, then the riders will be on their time trial bikes, and it'll really be kind of a pure time trial with a challenging aspect, but without kind of the gimmickiness of the bike change. Just my opinion. And
I agree with you. I mean, it is a kind of gimmick. It's kind of in fashion at the moment, and you know, I certainly agree that you know, it could well swing back the other way. Maybe, you know, if the riders' union gets organised and made a case to say, look, we don't, you know, we're quite happy to have really challenging courses, but for all the reasons you've outlined, you know, we don't want too much of this. I think that would be fine. But personally, as just purely a spectator, it was a really absorbing watch. And I know there is a balance between, you know, because we all kind of, we do, you know, we look up at the screen, we pay extra attention when there's a bit of a shambolic clipping in, as I think Alejandro Valverde didn't get a particularly smooth transition, did he?
There from a Valverde.
It was. I mean, you know, he's not that experienced at cycling, is he? So
maybe not used to clipless pedals.
But that's an interesting point, Lionel. You're obviously, you know, you're looking at it the perspective of a viewer wanting the excitement, and I'm looking at it the perspective of a professional racer saying, really, I just want to go out and race my time trial, and I don't want my time trial to be measured on how well I can jump off a bike and jump back on of it, because being able to do that is not part of my trade. Being able to ride a bike as fast as I can and as technically perfectly as I can is what I practice at, and what I'm trying to do, and I'm not trying to jump off and jump on a bike. So yeah, it's interesting to see kind of the spectators' view of it all, and the pro racers' view of it. But I wondered what the guys in the race would think of it.
I haven't heard any of them complain about it, but I mean, let's talk about the result itself, because that was obviously the significant thing today. Roglic, as expected, took the jersey back, and as a reasonable lead, but it's still pretty open. I mean, Carapaz rode pretty well today, and Hugh Carthy rode exceptionally well. You know, fourth on the stage was a really great result for him, 25 seconds down. It's between those three, isn't it? They all had pretty good days. I think, actually, and I floated this idea before we started recording, but I think of the three of them, Roglic had the kind of average day for him. You know, if you'd told me a couple of weeks ago that Roglic would be a second up on Will Barta and 25 seconds up on Hugh Carthy, I would have said, well, that's not Roglic at his best. I mean, this today was not Roglic at his absolute peak in terms of time trialing. And so I just wonder if his trajectory is ever so slightly downward. And we have tended to see in Grand Tours that he has faded a bit towards the end. Even at the Vuelta last year, which he won, you know, he might not have won that had Movistar not chased down Pogačar on the penultimate day. And he did kind of struggle that day. So there's still a few tough days ahead for him, in particular the penultimate day. And much will depend on how steep that trajectory is, if indeed Roglic is on a slightly downward curve at the moment.
The Cycling Podcast is supported by Science in Sport. Science in Sport. Fueled by science.
Thank you very much indeed to Science in Sport for their support of the Cycling Podcast. Very, very grateful to them. If you want 25% off all your Science in Sport goodies, go to scienceinsport.com and enter the code SISCP25. And if you have a question for James Morton at Science and Sport, then email us, contact@thecyclingpodcast.com. We'll hear from James again answering one of your questions in tomorrow night's episode. Well, before we paused there, I was suggesting that, Roglic, there might still be twists in this race yet, depending on what sort of shape Roglic is in. He's won this stage. It seems ridiculous to say that he's not in top shape, but, as I say, the pattern in his career has been decline in the final week of a Grand Tour. It's all relative, of course. We cling on to that a little bit, not that we don't want him to win, but just because we want an exciting race.
I mean, the question is, and we can debate a lot whether or not Roglic would have wanted or expected more than a 39-second lead after the time trial. But the big question looking at the final stages is 39 seconds over Carapaz and 47 over Hugh Carthy going to be enough? Is there the right kind of battleground for Ineos and EF Pro Cycling to put Jumbo-Visma under pressure with the resources they have? Is the Vuelta done, or is it going to be a nail biter all the way to La Covatia on Saturday?
Yeah, it's a really tough question, and you have to look at what the riders want to get out of the race. And Carapaz is obviously in second now, and he didn't come here to get a podium result. He came here to win. So for sure, if he wants to win, he's got to do something special. Does he want to wait till the penultimate stage? Okay, well, if we look at Roglic's trend of perhaps kind of fading off a little bit towards the end of the Tour, then maybe that's the best bet for him, because he's going to capitalise on a potential accumulated fatigue of Roglic and then try and go all out on that final climb on the penultimate day. Also, then you look at Hugh Carthy. Okay, so if you'd have said to him before this Tour, Hugh, you're going to come in and you're going to take third at the Vuelta, he'd have probably bitten your hand off. But now that he's there, I bet your bottom dollar that he wants more and he's going to go for it. And we've seen that he's not been scared to attack. And that's really, really exciting. But then you look into what's left on the stages, and is there space for a long range attack on the stages to come tomorrow? I don't really think so. Stage 15, not sure. I think that really the penultimate day probably is the only space for attacking on the final climb. And, you look at the team that surrounds Roglic. He's got such a strong team that if you do an attack really far out, he's got 6 guys that are just going to be able to pull him the whole way. So I really think that it probably is going to come down to that penultimate day. Or is it going to come down to the weather? I don't know what the forecast is like in Spain for the rest of this week, but I heard an interview with one of the riders saying that they thought it wasn't looking great. And so, will the riders learn from the lessons of old, both over in the Giro and the lessons from this Vuelta too? Because we've seen that not getting your jacket on at the right time can cost you big time.
It can also make the roads dangerous. Well, we'll hear from George Bennett a bit later on about Movistar in particular, but they had Mas was a big disappointment today. He's gone from being within range, really, to 3:23 down now overall. And that really, makes it very unlikely that he could claw back that sort of time. So the Movistar threat has been slightly neutralised today, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Rich, that unusually for the Vuelta, there are 2 long stages back-to-back now, 204 kilometres tomorrow and 230 kilometres on Wednesday, which by Vuelta standards really are long stages. I mean, it's only happened once in about the last 10 years that there's been back-to-back stages of that sort of length in the Vuelta. So it's an interesting final week in that it's not quite what we would normally expect from the Vuelta. We'd normally expect a run of short, explosive, really difficult climbing stages with all the action condensed into short periods of time, whereas there's a couple of slow burner days. And I suppose really if you look at it mathematically, you're absolutely right. Movistar, who are the sort of team that could really create a bit of havoc with multiple riders able to go up the road, could get Jumbo-Visma chasing early, but the numbers don't work in quite the same way for Ineos or EF Pro Cycling, do they? And of course, the one big factor is it doesn't really matter how many Movistar, Ineos or EF Pro Cycling riders go up the road and put pressure on Jumbo-Visma at this stage now, the key is that the rider gaining time have to be Carapaz or Carthy, and that's going to be the tricky bit. And I suppose whilst Jumbo-Visma will need to be vigilant, I'm pretty sure they've got the numbers to just keep a lid on things over the next few days. Having said that, anything could happen. 39 seconds is not a minute and a half, obviously. Mechanical problems, punctures, whilst we never really want to see Grand Tours decided by that, they are an ever-present threat and a clear obstacle that could get thrown up for Roglic to contend with. So it's going to be interesting to see whether these next couple of days, next 3 days, I think, throw anything really interesting at Roglic, or whether it's just a case of Jumbo-Visma using their obvious strength to throw a bit of a fire blanket over the whole race, and then hope that he's got enough in the tank for the final stage or the final mountain stage on Saturday.
Absolutely. I mean, if Carthy or Carapaz want to take the win, they've got to lay it all on the line and do something special, or they've got to wait for the final day and hope that he's going to crack. And that's kind of both of them were a risky strategy, I'd say. If you lay it all on the line, you've got a lot to lose, but you've potentially got a lot to gain. But then if you wait to the final day, if you don't get it, then that's it. That's the last chance. The climb itself, La Covertia, just looking ahead briefly to Saturday, it's the one where Ben King won one of his stages in the 2018 Vuelta. I mean, it is a tough climb, and some gaps did open up between the GC riders in the final 2 or 3 kilometres. So there will be opportunities, and it will come down to whether Carthy and Carapaz have got enough to throw at Roglic and whether Roglic can respond. Yeah, looking at that final climb, Alto della Covertia, 7.5k out from the end, that's when it really ramps up, and you've got a couple of kilometres at 10.5%, 9%, and so there's a real chance that if you do leave it to the last day, which is probably the best bet, I would say, you attack hard, but you attack hard 7.5k, 6k out, and you just go for it and you see what you can do from there, and you hope that Rog goes, yeah, well, this is a bit far, we'll pull them back, and then actually you get enough of a gap and then he blows up trying and you take the win. That's a risky strategy, but I think it's probably the best strategy if you want to go for the win, because I think that really on the stages between now and then it's too risky and Jumbo-Visma are just too strong.
I mean, it'll come down to people's legs on that climb. As you say, Lizzie, it's pretty steep and hard, and we saw on the Angliru, there comes a moment where it doesn't matter how strong your team is. If you don't have the legs and you can't follow, then you get dropped, and that could well happen. I mean, Roglic lost 26 seconds to Carthy on the Angliru, which is not much at all. There was a very interesting bit of data put up on Twitter from somebody comparing over the years the time gaps between the top 5 or 6 on the Angliru, and it's really narrowed over the years. This was the closest the top 6 have ever been at the summit of the Angliru, which tells you the margins are pretty small. But if the legs go, the legs go, and Roglic's legs went on the Angliru, not spectacularly.
I don't know if they went. I would just say he was riding a tempo that wasn't quite... I wouldn't say that he wasn't able to respond to the attacks and increase his pace. And, you say teammates don't matter, but actually they do matter, because that final kilometre
I'm not saying they don't matter, but, I mean, Sepp Kuss was visibly waiting for him on the climb. Sepp Kuss can only go as fast as Roglic can go at that point.
Absolutely, but he helped Roglic limit the losses, because in that final kilometre and of course in the final downhill bit, actually the drafting benefit was quite significant. And so because Sepp was able to go faster than Rog, he was... I think the gap was out to 14 seconds once Carthy had attacked, and he only kept on going faster. And then... Roglic actually managed to limit that gap back to Carapaz to only 10 seconds. So Sepp Kuss actually brought it back by being able to increase the pace on the slightly flatter bit, so that Rog was getting a bit of a benefit from the draft.
But if Rog has a moment like that, further down the climb, then suddenly 30, 40 seconds doesn't seem very much at all. And so that's
for sure, but I still don't think that he cracked on the Angliru. I think that he was riding a tempo that was the tempo that he could ride. We'll hear from George Bennett in a minute, but I think that they all considered that he had a good ride on that mountain, which was perhaps not his kind of perfect kind of mountain, because it was so brutally steep.
Well, let's hear from George Bennett now. He was talking on the rest day before the time trial, but he anticipated pretty well what was going to happen and looked ahead to this final week.
I think we're pretty good, you know. Like, obviously, it's always better to be in front than behind, but we're only 10 seconds behind, you know. Just looking actually at a video of the TT. We'll do all the recon and stuff tomorrow, but it's not too long, but I think it's going to be really decisive. Hopefully that's in our favour, but we'll kind of need to be, because there's not really much time to make up lost ground afterwards if it's not.
Yeah, you said that you felt like it was the decisive moments were all this side of the time trial and the time trial itself.
I mean, the weekend just gone's been huge. I mean, Saturday wasn't massive just because of the headwind on the final climb, but the rest of it was super hard. And then, yesterday was really the chance for Carapaz to take big time. And, Roglic Primoz had a great ride and limited it to just 10 seconds. So I think we were pretty happy coming out of the weekend and considering with all the stuff that happened and on the Sunday before with the rain jackets and things like that. We've got 6 days left. Hopefully tomorrow, I mean, that's out of my control tomorrow, but the other, 4 days, let's say, are really just dependent on what happens tomorrow.
I heard the podcast you did about the rain jacket gate. It's been a bit of a theme. I guess that's what happens when you have Grand Tours in October and into November. Apart from that one wobble that day, it's been a pretty solid performance from the team. I mean, you said on the eve of the race that you weren't going to race it the same way as you did the Tour, trying to control everything. I guess we have seen Jumbo-Visma riding on the front quite a lot. Is that just the way that the racing has gone?
I think it's more because there's just no one else to do it. The other teams just don't have the collective strength. I mean, Movistar are very strong, but the 3 strong guys are all having their own crack at it. Yeah, I mean, at times it becomes uncontrolled, and then, as much as we didn't want to race like that, it's kind of like, well, if we don't, we kind of flick ourselves, so we end up just taking up control and making sure that no one can attack. I wonder in the future if that'll mean that teams will put time trials earlier and organisers will put time trials earlier in the races, and then so you don't have this dependence on we're all gambling on the TT and everyone doesn't realise yet if they're going to lose lots of time in the TT. It does sort of maybe stop as much attacking.
Have you been surprised, Ineos? I mean, Carapaz obviously very strong, but he's often quite isolated.
They only have 6 guys in the race left. On paper it was never their strongest team, and obviously with Birnie still coming back and taking a bit of time to come back, which is expected, considering the crash he had. They were spread thin. They were on the back foot a little bit with losing G in the Tour, and then Teo, their other sort of main rider now, was in the Giro. I think they're just a bit short on numbers, and the level's super high in this race, and we've managed to scrape together the guys that are still sort of, we're getting another great Tour out of Sepp. Primoz obviously up for it again, and then Robert's backing up well, and I'm sort of hanging on just.
Well, you're hanging on quite high up there.
I'm a ways off the pace, but it's actually everything I got out of myself after the Tour was a bonus. I mean, the way I was coming the week out of the Tour, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to ride my bike again for the season. So, to be here and be able to contribute is at least nice. But I'm definitely paying for, definitely feel when I haven't had a good preparation, had a bit of time off the bike, haven't had any altitude in my legs for nearly 3 months now. You definitely feel that, okay, although I'm healthy and I'm fit and I'm not injured, so, every day I start feeling well, you realise that you just don't have the turbo to go when you need to go right in the final. And it's made it very clear that altitude and specific preparation for races are crucial. Although nobody had a perfect preparation for this race. I mean, it's November and there's not many people that were putting all their eggs on the Vuelta basket.
No, I mean, given that, are you surprised? You're a teammate of his, but I think everyone's surprised watching Roglic, his mental fortitude as well as his kind of physical toughness, the level that he's been at for so long, and to come back from the disappointment of the Tour and perform like he is performing. Does he just constantly surprise you?
I think it's quite easy to be mentally tough when you're winning. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's harder when you keep taking big losses and you're way off the pace, and that's when you get your head down. And I think that's when you need real mental strength to get back on and keep going in another race and deep into the year and all that stuff. I think when you've just been winning everything you do, it's fun, And okay, in the Tour he didn't win, but he almost won, and he still won stages, and he still was, essentially. Surprise, it was a big surprise that he didn't win on the last day. And again, sure, wouldn't have been fun to take, but he was still the major player of the Tour. And so I think the mental toll of winning isn't necessarily anything like the guys that are just getting your head kicked in day after day.
What's the threat to Roglic this last week? Is it a rider? Is it Carapaz? Or is it just, his own fatigue catching up with him, because he must be tired by now?
For sure, it's a long range attack from somebody, but yeah, misfortune's a big one, and there's plenty of traps in the last week. I mean, there's not the big mountain stages, but there's
it's ambush territory, is it? Do you think?
Yeah, it is. It's also it's stormy weather. I don't know if it's going to be a great weather week. There is a lot of traps, and there always is in a Grand Tour. So
you're going to have to be on it all week.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's also, the Movistar risk is huge, because they love to play up every time it sort of goes downhill or a small road or any opportunity. They just attack. And like yesterday, they just lit it up on a downhill. We were on it, but like on another day, maybe something could go wrong with a bike, or you know what I mean? There's always that kind of thing. So we've always got to be ready. And I'd love to just say that after tomorrow we can take the foot off the gas and cruise into Madrid, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
Well, if you listen to the cycling podcast for a while, you'll be familiar with LACA, the bike insurance company, with a very kind of innovative business model. It's a community of cyclists supporting each other. Your premiums are set by the number of other claims from LACA customers, and there's a ceiling on your monthly premium. We've got a long relationship with LACA, as I said, and we've taken that relationship a stage further. Now, if you sign up to LACA Bike Insurance, you will also be supporting the Cycling Podcast. They have a lot of Cycling Podcast listeners as customers, and they're keen to gather them all together as a community within their greater community. Go to laca.co.uk and enter the code TCP for bike insurance and equipment insurance, and that will put you automatically in the Cycling Podcast community. Now, we heard before the break there from George Bennett of Jumbo-Visma. Solid ride from him today. He's been a good sort of support rider for Primoz Roglic at the Vuelta. Not quite at his best, I think, and he's frustrated by that. Same at the Tour, because he was in fantastic form before the Tour, and unfortunately that crash on day one has really kind of knocked him sideways. But he's riding well and obviously quite confident. But it was interesting to hear him talk about Movistar and how sort of unpredictable they can be. They're keen to leave their mark on this race, aren't they? That this is their national tour. They feel like they have not ownership rights, but certainly almost a responsibility to do something and to have a real impact on the race. So, for all that Enric Mas had a bad day, and it's kind of hard to imagine him, getting near to the red jersey, they could still produce something, or they could do something that has some kind of bearing on the race.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see Marc Soler in the breakaway again tomorrow. I mean, he's going to be given the time. He's 18 minutes down now, so he's going to be given the freedom to go for it in terms of the peloton not seeing him as a threat anymore. And if he was in there, it would cement their place in the team classification by getting him some more time. And unless Rog fancies his chances in the finish and fancies himself another 10-second bonus tomorrow, then you can see tomorrow and the next day as breakaway days.
Well, one man who probably won't be in those breakaways is Hugh Carthy. Well, I mean, who knows? He might be, but it's very unlikely. But his teammate Mitch Docker is, of course, the host of Life in the Peloton, and with a great sense of timing. Mitch's latest episode is an interview conversation with Hugh Carthy, which was recorded on yesterday's rest day and will be out for everyone to listen to tomorrow morning. That's Wednesday morning. So let's hear a little clip of Mitch Docker's chat with Hugh Carthy.
So you run me through coming into yesterday's stage. How are you feeling?
Another day where you wake up and you jump out of bed and you just feel right, some days when you're not going well, you don't sleep well, or you get up and your back's hurting, or things just go wrong, you're pouring your milk on your cereal and you overflow the bowl, you're not concentrating. But the past couple of weeks, everything's just gone nicely, everything just felt right on and off the bike. I've been getting up in the morning full of energy, and you just know, I like, for me, a lot of riders don't like walking upstairs, and I agree with that, you don't walk upstairs, but for me, I like to walk down the stairs. You can feel your legs, especially on your quads and your thighs. You feel your legs. If you've had a hard day or your body's not quite 100%, it's really, really painful. But the past couple of weeks, I've been trotting down the stairs to breakfast or trotting down after the stage, and I've been hearing other people wincing. Oh, legs are tired, and I've been just sort of floating Harry Potter style down down the stairs on my broomstick, without sounding arrogant. But I just think, I knew, I've known the whole race that my legs have been good. I've been recovering well, sleeping well, eating well. The atmosphere in the team's been good, which gives you an extra gear. So, yeah, everything's been spot on for me so far.
Well, that was a fabulous little flavour there of Mitch Docker's longer conversation with Hugh Carthy. I really cannot wait to hear that, because Carthy has emerged in this Vuelta not only as a strong rider and a contender, but as a great personality as well. He has been giving these very dry interviews to Daniel for ITV. It's funny because his interviews with Daniel are very funny. I think Daniel finds him quite tough to interview because there's a no-nonsense quality to him. There's a sort of arched eyebrow sometimes when he's asked a question. But with Mitch, he opens up a bit more, doesn't he? I should say as well that Mitch did an episode with him for his own podcast, Talking Luft, which he does as sort of almost warm-ups for his main episodes, and that's really entertaining as well. He's very funny, Hugh Carthy. He's, a lot of it is deliberate, but he's really becoming a fascinating personality, isn't he?
He's such a great character. When I was back at Worlds with GB, I was there pretty early because I came straight from the Giro and he came straight from another race too. And so it was just a few of us on the table every day. And he was always cracking jokes, always, kind of happy-go-lucky. And, as we heard in that interview, that was already on Monday before his incredible time trial performance today. He was already riding that wave of,
on his
success
broomstick.
breeding success. Yeah. And that has such a positive influence. And the team, they've already had the wins and everybody in the team, and he is riding this positive wave and he's feeling great off the back of it. His legs are great. He's in the form of his life, and that makes such a difference mentally as well as physically. And then, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him do something really, really special on that penultimate stage, because he'll really have that belief from the Angleroo that he can do it and he can put time in where it matters on the really steep climbs.
I guess that makes EF Pro Cycling Hogwarts Cycling Club. Is that right? Have I got my Harry Potter references right here? I don't know. It's certainly a very British sense of humour, a very dry sense of humour that Hugh's got. And you're right, Rich, that Talking Luft episode that's already on Mitch's Life in the Peloton feed is really worth a listen if you want to get round to that as well. But tune in to Life in the Peloton on our feed tomorrow morning. It is a fantastic hour or so of Mitch and Hugh in conversation.
And before we go this evening, we should also say that yesterday we released our 10th and final episode of Kilometre Zero from the Grandest Tour, as we have called our coverage of the Giro, the Classics and the Vuelta. 10 episodes, all supported by Zwift. They also supported our Kilometre Zero series at the Tour de France. And the final one was the story of the Giro. That's what it's called, the story of the Giro. And it's the story of the Giro, in the words of the winner, Theo Gegenhardt, and the runner-up, Jai Hindley. We also hear from Luke Roberts, the Sunweb sports director, and Rob Hatch is in there too. Lizzy, you're in there. Lionel, you're there. Francois Tomaso and me as well. And, Will Jones, our producer, did a fantastic job putting it all together. And I think it tells a great story about what happened, and especially what happened on the day of the Stelvio climb.
I listened to it last night and it was such an excellent listen, and it just gave some really different perspectives to the whole race, and it really pieced together the whole race as well from so many different perspectives. So go and have a listen, because it's really something special. And then
have a listen to Service Course, Mutual Appreciation Society here. The latest episode of Service Course is an absolute cracker as well. Really, I listened to over 2 turbo rides. I needed to sort of...
Wow, you listened to it twice?
No,
Richard only does 20 minutes at a time.
No. No, I needed time to digest it all properly, because it's...
No wonder you need a coach.
I need to listen to it on half speed just to take it all in, because it's just too much for my little brain, some of it 3D printing and all the rest of it. Whatever next? We should wrap it up.
Just before we do, just a couple of little points. People might be wondering why we haven't talked about the 2021 Tour de France route, which was unveiled on French TV on Sunday evening. Well, We've got Francois Thomazeau returning tomorrow, and if tomorrow is a relatively quietish stage, we'll talk about it then. If not, we'll hope to do so on Thursday. We'll see what the racing throws at us first, but we will definitely get into the Tour route in some depth with Francois in the next day or so. Also, just something that Lizzy said a couple of episodes ago, certainly caught me a little bit by surprise, but when I thought about it, it made perfect sense. But Lizzy, you said that you anticipated the Australian races not taking place because of the coronavirus pandemic. Well, we received a confirmation a couple of days ago that the Tour Down Under is indeed postponed, at least as far as the pro races are concerned. They're going to carry on with a sort of mass participation event for amateurs and recreational cyclists, but the racing will not take place in January 2021. But obviously we hope it will be back in 2022.
A couple of other things we'll do this week. I spoke to Mark Donovan, the young Sunweb rider, yesterday. We'll hear from him at some point this week. I also spoke to Fran Reyes. A few of you asked about Fran. He was part of our Vuelta coverage for a couple of years. He was working for the organisation in the first week of the Vuelta. He's very heavily involved in the new Spanish Pro Conti team. They'll step up to Pro Conti next year, Equipo Kern Pharma. And I spoke to him yesterday about that team and the path that they're on. So we'll hear from Fran as well later this week. But Lizzy, we should say a big thank you. Thank you for being part of our Grandest Tour coverage.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I've had a great 4 days of Lizzy Banks, and hopefully we'll be back and we'll get World Tour status next year.
You'll definitely be joining us again on the regular pod. We've had a lot of reaction to our
complaints.
We've had loads of complaints, and we've had lots of great feedback. We've had lots of great feedback on our rotating cast of hosts. Ian Boswell will be joining us again later in the week, Francois Thomazeau, and of course you, Lizzy. So thank you very much. It's been fantastic having your perspective.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, Lizzy.
Thanks both.
Thanks, Lionel.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Lizzy.